Hi, welcome to a new episode in the Internet Surfer, hosting the most horror and creepiest stories from Reddit. Please don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy.
Serious, what's your best "I've messed with the wrong person" moment? Episode 1. When I was on vacation in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, I saw a Russian girl carrying her own food in beach where you can't. Very stupid rules. So, one man from that beach staff tried to take that food from her. She didn't want her food to be taken from her and tried to rip it off his hands. So that man hit her in the face so hard that her glasses shattered. Unfortunately for that man, girl's boyfriend, or probably husband, noticed that. He was like Hulk but not green. So, Hulk punched that guy so hard that he immediately lost consciousness and dropped on the sand. After 10 seconds, two of the almost dead guy's friends came to beat that Russian Hulk but with no luck. One had his face smashed into the table and the other was hit with Hulk smash in his stomach. I was 14 and at a summer camp. There was this Russian kid who attended who had lived here for a year with family to go to school. Since he was a foreigner, I immediately singled him out and started picking on him. This went on for about 2 weeks with me mocking him in Russian accent, making jokes about Russians and generally just being a little prick. Then one day he had enough. He picked a fight with me, and I'd thought I would have easily won since I had almost a foot on the guy. Nope. I go in for a punch and he ducks, grabs my arm, and throws me over him onto the ground, breaking my arm in the process. I started crying. I was then taken to the hospital. I went back to camp, and I was forced to apologize to the kid, and I did. We ended up being friends and he tells me that his dad runs a jiu-jitsu gym in St. Petersburg and is a former Spetsnaz soldier. He wasn't the kind to boast, so I believed him. He told me his dad trained him in jiu-jitsu for most of his life. That day I learned you probably shouldn't mess with strangers because you have no idea what they are capable of and that everyone should get them kicked at least once in their life, so they know this. At work I had a chess board and would play with various people during lunch. None of us were particularly great or anything, it was just a fun diversion. One day one of my coworkers came up, an older woman who was always overly sweet and quiet, and asked if I wanted to play a game. She destroyed me. Like, it wasn't even a close game. Towards the end I would make a move and she would just say, in the sweetest tone possible, "Oh, are you sure you want to make that move?" Destroyed. Turned out she had actually competed in some chess tournaments when she was younger, and both of her sons were active competitors. As an arrogant 14-year-old, I was at Sky Zone, a recreational place with a lot of trampolines. I was in the dodgeball section, and I told a 20-something man that was the number one person on my people to get out list. This man was put on the other team, and he was a very athletic man. He proceeded to hurl these rubber dodgeballs at what seemed like the speed of sound as he eliminated my entire team 3 games in a row, saving me for the last game. Every time he got me alone he hit me in the dick in front of all my friends. I should not have messed with him. From a friend and one of the bouncers at the club he works at. This bouncer had not long started work and was sent by his security agency to cover a shift in Merthyr Tydfil. I've not been but heard it's quite a rough area, and during the night, the head doorman refused entry to a guy for being too drunk and for being involved in an incident at a different nightclub a few weeks prior. The drunk man began to get all up in the head doorman's face, threatening to come back with the boys. This is usually quite an empty threat. Normally a drunk man gets all angry for a bit and then walks away / moved on by the police. In this instance the guy walked away and the new bouncer who was covering thought the issue had passed. 30 minutes later the drunk guy returns with 15 of his friends, marching down the road like a scene from Green Street / Football Factory. The new bouncer is watching these guys approach with the head door attendant thinking, we're going to be in a spot of trouble here. He sees the head door attendant reach inside his coat pocket. Does he have a weapon or something? It is going to hit the fan. The head door attendant produces a gum shield from his pocket, puts it in his mouth and limbers up his neck and cracks his knuckles, all in complete silence and calm. The lads approaching sees this and pauses before one shout, "Nah, hate that mate," and they all scatter. The new bouncer asked not to be sent there on cover again. When I was younger, my family would go rafting with a couple other families down a very calm river. People would often bring some kind of squirt gun, and people would try and fire at people in other rafts. Everyone on the river did this. Well, one time we were floating by an exceptionally large group, at least 40 plus. They had all their rafts tied together, which were all covered by towels. We thought, oh boy, we should get them. Look how many people there are. This will be epic. Mind you, this is the 9-year-old mentality. Then, we issued the first strike. This is where things went wrong. They shouted, I wouldn't do that. We had heard this before, an opposing raft issuing mild threats to get us to not fire our Tinker Toys squirt guns. Hence, we continued. Another warning, I really wouldn't do that. The measly firing ensued. Then aloud, you've really done it now. And this is when I thought, I messed with the wrong person. Suddenly, the sound of a generator came across the river. The group of 40 plus unveiled all of the towels, only to display they had a fire hose. The pressure from the fire hose was insurmountable and could easily reach the other side of the river. Our entire group was heavily doused in a matter of seconds. Needless to say, the squirt gun game ended quickly. In 7th grade I grew from 5 feet 2 inches to 5 feet 9 inches within a span of 8 months. I went from being of average height to looking over the heads of 85% of my classmates. Never really got picked on, but now I had a sudden confidence that I could take on anyone that messed with me, and I was, for the most part, correct. One day my older brother, whom is 7 years my senior, but only 5 feet 8 inches, and I got into it, and I finally physically stood up to him. I took a full-fledged swing with all of my weight in it. Didn't faze him, he just got mad. He put me in a full Nelson, slammed me into the hallway wall face first, then proceeded to use his chin to dig it into my neck for nearly a minute. I was crying and almost passed out. Right after my swing I distinctly remember thinking, he's going to murder me in our parents' basement. Ah, yes, this sounds familiar. It's the job of the older sibling to remind the younger sibling where they stand. My little sister learned that lesson when she got taller than me. Decided it was okay to start stealing my clothes since mine were better because I actually worked to buy what I wanted rather than asking my parents for new clothes. But she never took any of my things without asking again, so I believe I did teach her a valuable lesson on common courtesy. The fight did end before she had to break out the inhaler, though. I'm not that mean. In the last few days, I have had to repeatedly establish dominance over my younger brother. I'm 22 and he's 16, but we have different dads, so there's a bit of a size difference. He's 6 feet 3 inches and I'm 5 feet 7 inches. He also weighs about 10 pounds more than I do. He can reach me from across the room and I'm forced to do nothing but block, but that overwhelming need to put younger siblings in place will give you that edge you need to take them to the ground and give them wet willies in front of their friends. It was my sophomore year of HS. I was walking across the parking lot after school, on the way to my friend's car, when another student's car comes down one of the aisles and almost hits me. They start honking at me, like it's my fault, so I flip them off and keep walking. They chased me down 3 or 4 aisles as I just kept casually walking across the lot. When they finally catch up to me, this crazy guy I go to school with jumps out, ready to kill me. This is the guy in school who has been transferred like 10 times because he gets kicked out of every school, deals drugs, gets suspended every other day for beating someone up, etc. So, I start apologizing. I don't want any part of this man. I know the type of people you can and can't start with, and this guy is crazy. Somehow, I talk myself beating I had coming and take off with my friends. What I didn't know was that this guy had been expelled that day, and that night, he shot a guy in the face and killed him at a party. Glad I didn't decide to be myself that day. I think I may have told this one on here somewhere, but here goes. Senior year of high school, sitting in a pep rally. This guy starts making lewd remarks about one of the cheerleaders. Her boyfriend is sitting a couple rows in front of him and overhears. He turns around and tells the guy to knock it off. Guy tells him to mind his own business and keeps talking smack. A quick note about the boyfriend. We grew up going to the same school on the rough side of town. He was a tall lanky guy, played basketball, and had been in a fair number of fights when we were kids. Anyway, after the pep rally ends we're all filing out, and as soon as we get outside the guy jumps the boyfriend from behind and starts wailing on him. The boyfriend turns around and lays the guy out quick. The guy's cousin jumps in, and the boyfriend meets him, and they start trading blows. Another of the guy's friends jumps in and the boyfriend is fighting off with both of them. He lays the second guy out and is about to handle the third when one of the coaches grabs him from behind. Thinking it's just someone else attacking him, he spins around and decks the coach. After that, everything just stopped. The boyfriend was a little bruised up, but the others were worse off. The first one was still unconscious, the second one looked like he didn't know where he was, and the third was still standing but had blood pouring out of his nose and one eye was swelled shut. They definitely picked the wrong guy to mess with. Not me, but a friend I was traveling with. When I was 20, we were in a DCA drum corps for the summer, on our way to a show in PA or something. We had stopped at a Wendy's to eat. While we were there, a group of bikers, obviously part of a club, came to the same Wendy's to eat. They sat behind us. My friend decided to try to hit me with his straw paper. His attempt went right past me and hit a biker on the back of the head. We go dead silent, waiting for a reaction. Nothing. We let out a deep sigh of relief and continued eating. As we are heading out the door, my friend decides to use the bathroom. I waited for him on the bus. A few minutes later he comes flying out of the Wendy's, red-faced and looking terrified. Apparently, a biker had met him in the bathroom, cornered him and explained, "I'm the nice kind of biker, so I'm going to let you off with a warning, but be aware that many bikers would be kicking you right now. Get out of here." That was the end of shooting straw paper. When I was young I was in the Navy. And as you'd expect living amongst a couple hundred aggressive young men, I got into more than a few scraps. I was young, in great shape and had exceptionally fast hands, so I acquitted myself well and had a reputation as someone that you didn't really want to mess with. Another guy on our ship, a friend of mine, was rumored to have been a top-notch collegiate wrestler, almost, but not quite good enough to make the Olympic team that didn't go to Moscow in 1980, yes, I'm old. Anyway, being rather full of myself, and never having seen this guy in any kind of dust-up, I decided to have a go at him. We were just fooling around, there was no anger involved, just one young tough guy testing another. I goaded him a few times to show me what he had. I was poised, well-balanced and ready for him. And then I was on my back looking up at the sky. I wasn't hurt. I never saw him move. No time had elapsed. One instant I was standing in front of him ready for whatever he did, and the next I was on my back looking up at the sky. Genius that I was, I figured it had to be a fluke. So, I got up and tried him again. Once again, never saw him move, didn't feel a thing. Just one instant I'm in front of him ready to go, and the next I'm on my back looking up at the sky. And once again, no time had elapsed. Well, I am less stupid than I am stubborn, so I admitted that he was better than I was and stayed where I was to contemplate the clouds floating silently overhead. Never before, or since, have I ever been so utterly and completely overmatched. Let me say this again, so it's truly clear. I never saw him move. Twice. I've gone toe to toe with wrestlers before, but nothing I'd ever done prepared me for this guy. I still don't know what he did, all I know was that one instant I was ready to fight, the next I was on my back. Not hurt, never felt a thing, never saw a thing, didn't notice the passage of any time. It was like I had been teleported from a vertical position to a horizontal one. That was the day I learned the difference between a good athlete and a world-class athlete. It's a story about my brother. We're from Ireland, but now my brother lives in Boston with his fiancée. I flew to Boston to visit for a couple of weeks, and we decided to go downtown one night to hit the bar scene. It was me, my brother, and his fiancée. Anyways, we're standing in line when all of a sudden a guy pushes through us and takes a spot right in front of us. He was wearing a military uniform, Navy I think. Although I'm not 100% sure. My brother's fiancée fell to the floor because of this guy, and all he did was look over his shoulder and snigger after he did it. Naturally, my brother confronted him but was met with various insults that ended with something like, "You see this uniform, guy? Yes, go away." So yes, it's an understatement to say that my brother has a sharp temper. After a few seconds, my brother stuck his boot into the side of the guy's knee, which caused him to fall towards the weird floor. As he was falling, he was caught with a serious right hook which in turn, knocked unconscious. I don't know what happened after that as we had to leave the area sharply. It proves you're not a harass because you're wearing a fancy uniform. Edit. It should also be a lesson that you shouldn't act like a tough guy to someone you don't know, as they could be well capable of taking you apart. My brother is 6 feet 1 inch, weighs around 230 pounds and trained in boxing for 5 years before moving on to training in Muay Thai and taking part in MMA for the past 3 years. I outweigh him and I'm taller, but it is tough if I had to fight him. I was pretty young, 14 to 16-ish, and I had a bit of a reputation for fighting. Just schoolyard, nothing real. But I was out late one night being a hooligan with some friends who worked at McDonald's, and we got hungry. So, we head that way to cash in on their employee discounts, and there's this little Asian man standing out front, sweeping I think. He looked about 40 and pretty haggard, I'm talking thin, hunched over, wispy mustache, glasses, about a foot shorter than me. My friend says, "This is Moon Sue," something like that, definitely had moon in it, and he could kick all of our asses. Now he said this directly to me, intentionally because he knew I was the kind of hothead who would want proof of this. I loudly proclaimed, "No chance." Sweeper Moon wasn't too far away and heard the whole exchange, and I guess you don't get to middle age working at Medics without being a bit of a fun, because he threw his broom down and his hands up to square off with a cocky teenage kid at that mild of a provocation. I wasn't scared of him, at all. I had already beaten a few black belts at high school, and I had a huge size advantage. So, I was laughing when I obliged him and put up my hands as well. What happened next was so fast and wild that I still don't really understand it, but I was hit with an incredibly large amount of open palm strikes in the span of about 5 seconds. They were so fast that I had no time to even think about blocking or clinching with the guy. All I could think was, "God damn it, I have messed with the wrong guy. This is like a real-life Mortal Kombat combo." After a few shots to the face, I went down onto my knee and cupped my head in submission. Moon just picked up his broom and resumed sweeping, and I went in for some humble fries with a side of shame. Was working for a NASA grant, Ep1, many years ago. Got paid, closed the grant, plus too frustrating and hasteful, would not do again. Literally a year later, got a phone call from a NASA grant admin who wanted some more paperwork. I said I was done with the grant, go away. Admin said, well, I won't pay you until you complete this paperwork. Me, you've already paid me. Admin, huh. Well, if you don't give me the paperwork we'll pay you again. Thought about it for a moment, told him that the paperwork would be there in a few business days. Edit, thanks to you /meme compop for the suggestion. Think of the worst bureaucracy you've ever had to deal with. Unless you already selected NASA, NASA is probably worse. Now, think of the hassle of dealing with a double payment. You don't get to keep the money, you get to go through some tortuous, potentially expensive process of getting the money returned to your books cleared or facing civil and criminal penalties. Paperwork blizzard, maybe a year of hassle. Admin knew exactly what he was saying, and so did I. I was bartending back in the day when some younger gentleman attempted to hustle one of our hustlers. He proceeded to beat them for roughly 2 hours of pool. Towards the last game, as our resident hustler was getting tired of hustling the younger gentleman, one of them slipped outside rather quickly. The older one began to protest that he wasn't being given a chance to win back his money, and rather tough luck was given as the resident sat at the bar and ordered a beer. By the time I had brought the beer back, our resident hustler had been asked to step outside for being rude enough to hustle some hustlers, and he obliged. When he got outside and squared up against the young man, his partner that had slipped outside the bar came running down the block with a tire iron and hit our resident hustler right in the back of head. As I started to dash for the phone, I heard our resident loudly proclaim, "Who brought the tuning fork?" At which point, he took away the tire iron and proceeded to beat the unholy hell out of the two younger men, and then he came back into the bar to drink the beer I had poured. It happened during Navy A school. This guy Joe grew up in Brooklyn and spent much of his time boxing to stay off the streets. He was of Puerto Rican descent. He began flirting with a very pretty young lady of African American heritage. This did not sit well with some of the other young sailors attending this fine school. One day he and I exited the mess hall, and 3 guys jumped at him. I try to help him, and he tells me this is not my fight. Joe beat all 3 guys. One guy had a fractured orbital, and he broke ribs on another guy. I stood by and did nothing. I didn't need to. I never saw anything like it. In high school I took AP US History from a Vietnam vet. He was a stern man with no patience and a heart of gold. I loved his class. He presented history based on factual documentation and with as little bias as possible. He forced us to critically think and encouraged discussions regularly. His tests were always 50 multiple choices, 50 true or false, and 2 timed essay questions. You always studied for those because the easiest part was the timed essay. There were no easy multiple choice questions. For example, if it asked you the date of an event, unless you knew the correct answer, all 4 answers made complete and total sense. When the class did well, he baked us brownies. I'm not sure if they were delicious on their own merit or because we earned them, but they tasted like victory. To this day, I've never had a more challenging or rewarding class. The only sign of his service was a small banner that read Army Ranger he kept posted on his window. From time to time, he'd tell us silly stories about his unit, but kept most of his service secret. Some kids did some snooping, and a rumor he had been tapped for Delta and was a sniper in Vietnam started flying around school. Aside from AP US History, he also taught psychology as an elective. I signed up because I loved his classes, also brownies. On the first day he handed out syllabuses and gave a brief overview of the things we would be covering. When he finished he asked if there were any questions we would like answered. I think part of the reason I loved his AP class was my classmates. We were all there because we wanted to be and took our academic pursuits seriously. Psychology was not the same batch. This moron kid, who I recently found out is incarcerated on multiple DUI counts as well as domestic abuse and possession with intent to distribute, raised his hand. He asked how many men, women, or children he had killed in Vietnam and whether or not he had kept ears as trophies. Immediately, everyone in the class knew how this kid was. There are some lines you don't cross, especially when you're talking to a guy who had a heart attack and a week later was out running 10 miles, a light jog, as he put it. The teacher handled it professionally and said he was only taking questions pertinent to the class. The kid followed up with, "So like 20 or what?" You know that moment when you drop a glass and realize there's nothing you can do to save it? The only thing you can do is brace for the impact. Imagine that moment lasting longer than it takes for a glass to fall. Imagine it felt that way for a full minute. 2 minutes. An hour. A lifetime. That's how it felt in that room. Everyone looked intently at their belly buttons while we waited for the hammer to drop. Well, everyone except for me. My eyes were squarely on my teacher. He used to say that life is defined by the trying moments, the difficult ones. It's easy to act morally and justly on a full belly. The mark of a man is how he handles himself under duress. His jaw clenched and lips tightened as he placed his hands firmly on the podium he lectured from. He was an expert in the slow blink and now employed it with devastatingly terrible connotations. Mr. Redacted. Please collect your belongings and take yourself to the office. I will be along shortly. The classroom sat in silence. We knew how it felt when he was disappointed we didn't do better on a quiz. We knew how it felt when someone asked a boneheaded question. But this feeling here, was new. It was coals of anger restrained only by sheer force of will, it was rage incarnate. What? The kid smiled and looked around at his silent classmates. Did I say something wrong? Why do I have to go to the office? I wish I could say this kid had balls of steel, but all evidence points to the contrary, he had brains of mush. Mr. Redacted, his voice was even and controlled, but radiated power. You will collect your belongings and see yourself to the office right now. He repeated again slower and clearer, or I will assist you in doing so. And then it hit. Like a tsunami wave crashing against the shore, he realized how he really was in. He wasn't being sent to the office because the teacher was angry, he was being sent to the office for his own well-being. Finally breaking my sight line, I look at the kid. His face was pale and mouth slightly open, signifying the epiphany currently washing over him. He quickly grabbed his stuff, not even bothering to put them in his bag, and left. My teacher took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and then said, "Are there any other questions regarding my class?" What I should have said was nothing. What I actually said was, "We still get brownies for doing well on tests, right?" He looked at me with the same cold eyes my classmate had earned. My boisterous confidence shriveled under the gaze. I had taken the anger from being asked if during a war he had butchered innocents and redirected it unto myself with a question. I will be joining my idiot counterpart soon. He gave me a slow blink and said, "Everybody but you, Mr. Kid, everybody but you." He gave me a small, rare grin as the class sighed and chuckled. Please open your textbooks to page, some number, and begin reading. I have other matters to attend to. I will return momentarily. The kid transferred classes that day. 3 weeks later I received my first, last, and only personal pan of brownies for a perfect score on his test. When I was 14, my brother, one of my longtime mentors and heroes, took me to NYC for my birthday. He was 29 at the time and was on leave from the military. He had left 1st Ranger Battalion and just finished the Army Special Forces Q course, Green Beret. By all accounts, he was and still is a bad mama jammer. He is incredibly quiet and soft-spoken and very gentle. We were on the subway headed to Times Square and I was standing next to him, both of us holding a vertical rail in the train. From the next compartment a group of young urban troubadours were passing roughly through the crowd and shoulder-bumping people to get through. When they bumped into my brother, it was like waves crashing into a rock. They eyed him and the leader of the group said something like, "Who are you? Are you supposed to be tough or something?" To which my brother calmly responded, "Actually, I am tough. If you care to find out for yourselves, let's wait until we're off the train. I'd hate to leave a mess in here." They made the wise choice of leaving at the next stop. My little brother and I pulled into a parking lot and another car is coming at us from the opposite direction and was drifting into my lane a little bit. My bro reaches across the seat and honks my horn for me, and the car moves back over, slams on the brakes, does a quick turn, and starts tailing me as I park. I pick a spot, and the car stops in the lane behind me, and this man gets out of the car with a super angry scowl and starts heading over to my door like he's got a problem. I look at my bro and go, "Way to go dumbass," and step out, and the dude stops dead in his tracks when he realizes I'm basically a monster at almost 7 tall and 300+ pounds. He doesn't even say anything and just dips back into his car and peels out, and my brother and I start laughing our asses off. Then I hit him by touching my horn. I'm biking home from school and I slip and fall in some mud. Not a terrible thing in and of itself, but a bunch of kids see and start laughing, saying stupid things like, "Her door, I think I'll bike through the mud." Whatever, I brush it off and bike home, thinking what's the worst that can happen, I'll never see those kids again. What I had missed was that a kid I knew from my karate classes was one of those kids, and he took it upon himself to rub that moment in my face every time he could. I tried laughing it off at first, but eventually he took it so far that I had to tell him to go away, which only spurred him on more, well into the realm of bullying. Fast forward to karate class. Surprise sparring day, and by sheer chance, he and I are the first opponents. Obviously, we both understand this is more than a friendly match. Ref starts us off, we each immediately deliver a resounding punch to the other's gut at exactly the same time. Then there's that moment of stillness, like in anime when the two swordsmen clash, then one of them is cut completely in half. This time, however, it's this kid realizing that he can't breathe. He starts coughing, tries raising his arms above his head, but nothing works. Ref asks him if he's okay, but he can't even get a word out. All he can do is sit down with the other students. I will go on to win my next few matches. Suffice it to say, this kid conveniently forgets about the mud incident.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.